On this episode of the Sacred Playgrounds podcast, we've got a friend in the house, Travis Allison from Go Camp Pros here. We're going to talk about camper recruitment and retention. Welcome to the Sacred Playgrounds podcast, where we turn numbers into stories and data into insights. We dive deep into theology and research, paired with practical wisdom and action steps to help camping ministries thrive. I'm your host and producer, Jared Rendell, a camp enthusiast and part of the Sacred Playgrounds team. This podcast features Dr. Jake Sorensen, a scholar, author, practitioner, and the founder of Sacred Playgrounds. Be sure to subscribe, submit a question to us to be featured on the podcast, and click that support button to help make these episodes happen. Find us on Facebook and Instagram at Sacred Playgrounds or at sacredplaygrounds.com. Wonder with us what God might have in store at your Sacred Playground. Hey, welcome to the playground, everyone. Jared here, Jake here, and Travis is here. How we doing, gentlemen?
Good. Thank you for having me.
I am doing great. So excited to be here and excited to have Travis with us.
So yes, we, as you heard in the quick intro, we've got Travis Allison from Go Camp Pro, and breadth and width and depth of camp experience, especially in how camps tell their stories. And so we're going to talk some about that today, in particular the impact that can happen when you do things like that. Well, so Travis, let's let people say hello. Why don't you just tell us a little bit more about yourself? Go Camp Pro quick, so people can get to know you before we dive in.
Yeah, thank you very much. And again, thanks for having me on the show. It's a topic I'm passionate about, and it's been fun getting prepared for this. I grew up going to church camp. I went to a Presbyterian church camp here in Ontario, Canada, for my whole camp life, and then off and on through high school and university and college. And then immediately after college, I got recruited to go to another Presbyterian camp and try to turn it around. I think they took a chance on a full-time 23-year-old camp director because someone had told them, this is your last shot. There will not be more chances. And they're like, well, okay. And I was super passionate about it. And I was also smart enough within the first 2 summers to recruit this woman that I had met working at Camp Kintail. Her name was Beth Blake, and she's incredibly smart, an amazing camp director who came and became my co-director for years. And then years later, we ended up in a relationship and getting married. So that was our... that's the nutshell of the camp experience.
Awesome.
It's like going to Bible college to get my MR.
Yep. Yeah, right. your MR degree. That's amazing. Thanks for that context. So you get to connect with lots of camps now, in a variety of ways. Tell us about Go Camp Pro.
Thank you. Yeah, so Go Camp Pro, I've always thought of us as being the enrichment program for camp directors. And we very purposely don't cover kind of the basics of how to be a camp director. We are for the camp director that is looking to push their camp, that wants to be way more intentional. So those kind of values I know align really well with what Sacred Playgrounds does. And so, as part of that, we've been running camp blogs and camp podcasts now for 15 years. Camp Hacker is definitely the longest running camp podcast, probably one of the first camp podcasts to talk about camp management. That's one of my shows. Jake has also been on another one of our shows called The Pudding, which is where we talk about camp research because the proof is in the pudding. And then we have other ones that are really specialty focused, camp owners, staff training, and day camps, one for counselors, etc.
What's really fun about this, Travis, I didn't know that we shared in common that when we were 23 years old, a very desperate camp called us to be their director. Travis and I have known each other for several years, and then we've never shared that particular traumatic experience from our stories.
It was, yes. Trauma indeed. But the pitch was pretty funny too. They're like, could you come? Our staff doesn't know how to sing anymore, and they don't know how to play games. Can you come and have that be your focus? And yeah, turned into 15 years at that camp.
Love
Yeah,
it.
the picture was a tad bigger, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Grateful for all that. We're going to let you know, everybody, where you can find Travis and Go Camp Pro and all these things here at the end. And Google search will get you there too. All right. So today we're going to focus on one of the things that Travis co-authored, and we'll let him talk through that in just a minute. Focused on camper recruitment and retention. And like I said, I'll let Travis break that down here in a minute. It is something that camps, whether you ministry faith-based camp, like most of the folks we connect with, or in this whole big picture of the thousands and thousands of camps, this is one of the things that aligns us all. We are about impact. We have a mission to fulfill. And the biggest part of that is giving campers a good experience. Campers, families, communities a good experience. So I love that what we're talking about puts us all in one big boat, aligns us all, whatever our mission of our camp is. We're on that boat at least. And so we're going to talk through this playbook. We just last week released kind of a review of this playbook on an article on sacredplaygrounds.com. We'll make sure that gets shared and linked as well. And now we get to talk through it right from the author's mouth. We're going to dive into that in just a minute. Before we do that, because of the breadth of camp experience, we're going to do our quick camp question.
Quick camp question.
Travis, those are my boys. Those are like, I've got 4 kids. That's 2 of them, the oldest and the youngest. I'm like, you guys come here. There's a mic. Say this.
I'm grinning to myself because we have a section in the Camp Hacker podcast called Tool of the Week. We also have a little kid's voice. That little kid is 19 now. So he of course didn't remember, but at one point I was like, hey, you're on all of our podcasts. Like, people have listened to you in 130 countries.
That's awesome. Put that on the resume. All right, guys, here's a question. So this is a question that came from this end of summer. We got a lot of great questions, so we just keep rolling through them. We did this end of summer pulse check with camp directors, with camp leaders. Like, how you doing? How was camp? What's going on in your world? What questions do you have? And thankfully, they put in a big pile of questions, and so we've been rolling through those. I want to pose one today to you guys. So here's a question. There was a lot in there. There was a lot in these questions about staff as well as campers. So knowing how important quality staff is to a quality experience, here's a question. Your thoughts and what we know about camps that are, whether it's kind of trends or things you've seen or lessons that you've learned and what you've seen from camps that highly prioritize the staff experience, maybe even above the camper experience. And we've heard that some from directors, that they're really, and we asked that question in some of our director surveys. So I'm curious your thoughts about camps that highly prioritize, maybe even more than the camper experience, that summer staff experience.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that's really important as we consider about staff retention. We're talking today about camper retention, but staff retention is also super important, and we've got to take care of our staff. And so many of our camps have a history of just wringing our staff dry, and by the end of the summer, they're super burned out, and it's really hard to get them to come back. So a lot of camps really do prioritize the staff experience and trying to take care of them during the summer, give them the proper time off, things like that, but also provide them with some extra special things, some extra special benefits in terms of spiritual care at some of our camps, but also some things to do on the weekends and other things like that to just really take care of them. And understanding that their mission isn't just to the campers, but they're also building leaders with these young adult staff. And so focusing on that and helping develop them in their personal life and in their development. And so I am all for this. You did say, prioritize staff above the campers. And I think that's going a step far, actually. And so I'd like to just throw that out there too, because there are ways that we can say we want to do this because of our staff. And if that takes away from the camper experience, then we're going backwards with what we want to do. And so one of the examples, a camp that I've worked with before, they wanted to give their staff an entire day off. So their camp ran Sunday to Saturday, and they didn't have, a full 48 hours off. And so they wanted to give them extra time off. So they ended the camp on Friday instead. That was super hard for the parents who were really used to traveling to camp to pick the kids up on Saturday, and so their camper numbers were going down. Why are our numbers going down? Well, let's ask the parents. And so there is a point at which you could prioritize staff over the campers to the detriment of your camp. So I think we can do both. I don't think we have to say, we're going to wring our staff dry in order to prioritize the campers.
That said, I think that for camp directors, I think camp, the larger organization, yes, it should be, but it's important that we do give some priority to staff because of that, just asking too much of them. But I think as camp directors, staff should be our job. And that should be the focus, because if we do that well, then the kids' care comes out of that. So who knows who said it at this point, but a phrase I often think about in these instances is that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And so focusing on staff, so not just treating them nicely, please do, but making them part of the mission, making them understand it, and making them really focused on, we're providing good experiences for you. It's your job. We're going to take some stress off of you so that you can focus on the campers. So closely related indeed.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. All right, here we go. It's time to dive into the playbook. As I read through this, just to give us a little segue from this quick conversation about staff, right as you were talking already, I was struck as I was thinking through, here were all these things in this playbook. A lot of that, while the actual engagements might be different, a lot of those ideas would be really helpful for some staff retention 100%. As well. In terms of the the year-round focus, we started to talk even more about that, like to really get out of this seasonality of, well, in a little while, then we'll start staff recruiting a couple months before camp. That's we know that's long gone. So, all right, tell us about the kind of origin. Where did this come from? Where did the camper recruitment and retention playbook come from? And tell us about your co-author a little bit there too.
Yeah, absolutely. The bigger picture origin of this is our frustration that camp directors are wasting time on things that don't work because they feel productive. And I mean, don't work for getting more campers to camp. I try to drill this into people all the time, that money moves the mission. And if we're not making money, we're not bringing campers in, then we have no ability to fulfill mission. So focus on what works and just be thinking about getting campers into the beds and being intentional about that. So a long time ago, I connected with Joanna. This is long ago enough that there really were not very many consultants talking about marketing and communications with camps. And really, Joanna and I at the time were kind of the ones. There's been others who've been in and out, and there's a lot more these days. So Joanna and I connected about that. We talked about our frustrations at trying to get people to focus on what works, or even try to understand what works. That level of setting things up to test them is a struggle for lots of camp people. So Joanna and I ran a program called Marketing Mondays, which was a monthly hour-long webinar for a year. We did it for 3 years. And then we were just looking for other ways to do this. And we realized that us saying things on video to people, even when we developed the program and people would have homework and they'd have learning groups and all that stuff, just the act of us saying things wasn't enough of them engaging with the material that we were giving them. So we put it all together in this book, and then we're very careful about the way we set up the book, that this is not a dense read. This is practical stuff. It's short. It is one of those things you can pull off the shelf. Like, I'm getting worried about camper numbers. We're coming up to in this case, the middle of October, and our camper numbers aren't where they should be. This you can pull off the shelf, flip to the October page, and pick from a prioritized list of what to do.
That's one of the things that I really love about this resource is, when Travis sent this to me and said, "Hey, could you check this out?" I was like, "Oh, another book." I've got stacks and stacks of books around me, and some of them are 300 pages long, and it's just like, okay, I'll put it on the pile. When I finally looked at it, it's like, this is super accessible. This is really easy to go through. I can read through the whole thing in just a couple of hours, but then I can go back to it and say, now I can dive into this part and this part and this part. So it's super workable. It's super practical. I was just really pleased to see all of that. And so thanks for providing this resource and making it so accessible. And it's not intimidating at all. So when people hear this book, don't think of it as like a book on a library shelf or something. This is going to be
Right.
on your desk right next to you, something that you use all the time, camp directors. And so,
And we've been offered a publishing contract if we would add 100 pages to the book. And
yeah.
we're like, no, I think this is right. I think it's the best way to make it practical.
Wow. I love that story. That's great. I really do think that you're right in keeping it short like this and super practical. Some of that practicality is the way that you lay out the marketing strategy, and I was just eating it up when I was reading it. Especially the introductory parts are so good. But you know, in the camping world, you know, we get to the March, April, May, and then we get camp directors calling and saying, hey, we need some help. You know, we got all these open spaces. We're behind. We need to fill these spots. We need some marketing help. And they're asking for that in April or May. And there's always this sense that it's just like, oh my gosh, this is way too late to be starting this and to start sounding the alarm bells. So Travis, when should we start recruiting for the next summer?
We should's a loaded word, of course, but we should start recruiting for next summer before the previous summer starts. We are doing work now, meaning that we're doing work now that we're thinking about how that applies to 2026. Both creating stuff. Yeah. So, I mean, we're definitely marking for 2025, but I think if you're a smart camp director who's good at managing their time and being really intentional about this, you're thinking about 2026 marketing at minimum in March or April of the previous year, 2025.
Yeah. So when people call in desperation saying we need help for this coming summer and it's April or May, I mean, what they really should be doing is looking ahead 2 summers.
Well, I mean, again, that's a should. I think there's always things you can do.
Both and sometimes.
Some camps have a culture, and this is it applies to church camps more than anyone else, it seems, have a culture of starting registration late. And so they don't know, like in my career, I've come across a stunning number of camps open registration on the 1st of April. And I don't know how you make any decisions with that, that amount of time. And so open registration earlier for sure, but just be thinking about how you're setting things up for the following summer. You can make a difference in April and May. Anyone hires us at that point, I just flat out say, I'm not going to tell you we'll get you more campers for this year. I think we can, but I won't tell you that. But it is, I think it's best practice to start in the spring of the previous summer, especially because you can think about what are the marketing assets that we have to gather. And we have campers and staff in front of us for the next month and a half, 2 months. And so what do we need to gather for photos and videos to sell camp for the season after this one?
Okay, Travis.
Yeah.
So I'm a camp director. I'm listening to this, and maybe I'm listening to it right when it comes out. It's October. You're already telling me that I'm behind. Okay, what can I do right now? Where should I start as I'm starting to look at camper recruitment for summer 2025, next summer?
Right. Let me be clear and say that you are not behind. Based on everybody else in the industry and when they're marketing, you're catching a good early part of the wave compared to the industry. The other was a should in a way I think we definitely try to encourage our clients to be thinking that far ahead. So do now. It is my driving force in this work that I do to take people that I care very much about, people who are camp directing, and make their lives easier. So that's Money Moves the Mission for sure. But it also is, please focus on something that we know that works. So always the easiest way to get campers for next year is to get last year's campers to return. So if you don't focus on retention first, you're making a huge mistake. And more importantly, you're wasting an incredible amount of effort. If you just assume that you can't, they leave mid-August and you open registration on December 1st or January 1st, and you send them one email that says registration's open, that they're going to sign up, that's a mistake. You need to be working on them all the time. You need to keep communicating and have them remember camp and remember the benefits. So easiest things to do, get last year's campers to return, get them to bring their friends, and then go for your camp community, those who already know and love your camp, and focus on those three things. And you will have a much easier time filling spaces at your camp. I'm someone searching Google for a Christian camp in Kansas is much less likely to come to your Kansas camp than people from related to those first three groups: last year's campers, their friends, and people who know the camp. So the engaged community.
This is super helpful to think about these audiences, and I really did appreciate that about the book, is that when you're talking about the marketing strategies, you divide it into these 5 audiences. And so tell us a little bit about these audiences and why we should be focused on them, and maybe a little bit about how we focus on each one.
Right. So there are definitely the audiences, and they align not directly with what I said, but they're all part of the three things that I said. So we talk about 5 audiences, first being last year's campers who are not yet enrolled. We also have a big dictionary section in our book about our terms, Travis and Joanna terms, as well as general marketing
One of my
terms.
favorite parts. I wrote that in the review, like the dictionary.
I had to
needed
flip to that
We didn't know
several
we needed
times.
it, but we needed it.
Yeah. Yeah. When I work with clients, one of the first emails is, here's the Travis dictionary. Here's the things that I might reference without explaining, to say no. So we put that in. So not yet enrolled previous summer's campers is one big chunk. And it is a thing that Joanna says that I love, and she says it all the time. It makes so much sense to me, is that camps have 2 clients. We have the campers and the parents, because campers do influence this decision. And parents obviously pay for that, and they have to be influenced. And so by being thoughtful and intentional about communicating at both levels, last year's campers who haven't yet signed up, last year's parents who haven't signed up, that's the first 2 groups. They're the easiest ones to sell on camp, the easiest ones to get in. I believe every camp should have, this is again a great Joanna thing, every camp should have up in their camp office, here's the list of last year's campers. Which ones do we know are coming? Which ones have told us a definite no, they won't be coming back? And a third column that says, have they paid us in full? And any morning you wake up and think, I need more campers, you go to that list and start picking people off. Like, we either need their money, we need to know that they're not coming, or we need to convince them to come back. And that gives you such a much easier focus than I'm going to write a blog post that talks about our faith development. That's long-term thinking, and it's kind of iffy anyway. So focus on those things.
So you're saying we should actually track the campers that came last summer. We should know their status at all times.
It should be the obsession of your whole, anybody who answers an email or a phone in your office should have that thing in front of them every day.
Wow. That's great. That's great advice. I mean, that's a paradigm shift for some folks, right? That I need to know where these campers are. These are the folks that we're continuing to impact. And we talk about that through Sacred Playgrounds all the time. That, the follow-up is so important, because you want to keep having that impact on these campers, because that's part of your mission. And from a marketing standpoint, you're also keeping them engaged and saying, what's happening to you next year, because we can keep impacting you as you come back to our space.
Yeah.
So I love that idea of tracking them on an individual level.
Yeah. The second level to that, which is not a first season thing, I don't think, but it's definitely for the camps that are really interested in metrics and experiments. The second level to that is, you can print off your whole camper list from last summer, or you can divide it up by sessions and whatever bunker cabin they were in, because you can then start to find patterns. Was it a problem with kids in this age group? Was it a particular problem with staff that they were engaged with? That's all good intelligence to make your life easier in the long run. Usually just start with the list, but definitely second level is add in those other factors that you can watch as well. Because you can start to see, like, all the kids from this session, from this cabin, we have none of them coming back. That's when I'm getting those parents on the phone.
Right.
Other camps,
Jake,
I have half of them.
That reminds me a bit, Jake, of just like, we've seen some of that shake out with, like, as we're doing effective camp reports, or, we research with a camp during the summer. And sometimes it's really helpful to, if they have a certain kind of breakdown in these 5 fundamentals, often Jake and others, as they're doing the analysis, will go through and they'll be able to pinpoint that week was this because this happened. Right? That comes up regularly in reports.
Yep.
Yeah. Sometimes it's an inner camper challenge that happens in the cabin, and it blows up. And sometimes it's camp wide, and so we can really see that in the data. So that's super helpful advice, because then you could actually target those folks, call them and say, we know that this happened and we want to talk through it and let you know what we're doing differently. So
Yeah, 100%.
that's great. Okay. So
Well,
those
that's
are
an interesting little nugget, Jake, that I want to not let go by. One of the most powerful things you can do in communicating about your camp with your community is to say, because of your suggestion, we are making this change. That tells them that we're listening to them. So because your kid had a problem with another kid and you came in and said, what would, you gave us a few ideas, you can go out to the community and say, because of the parents in the feedback forms or things you've talked to, we're making this particular change. That means you get more feedback in the future. You have more engaged community. And it's just a smart overall long-term thing to be. Everything's a communication game to me, but that's a very smart way to do it, is to say, you gave us this idea. We think it's great. We're doing it because of you.
To actually respond to the evaluation that you get. That's amazing, right? And that's what we try to work with our clients too. Don't let it sit in a report. Like, these are some action steps that we need you to do. But I love what you're saying is to actually acknowledge this. This was a challenge last year, and here's what we're doing to address that. Here's how it's going to be better. For your campers and you next summer.
So that speaks to a term that you guys use in the playbook a bunch of times, right? Yeah. And that would be a really tangible example of creating a noticeably improved product. Yeah. That's something that you guys bring up in there. Yep. There's a few really great terms that I loved in there, and that was one of them. Jake, you had mentioned that too. So, like that puts teeth to something like that. Hey, we're doing this. We're responding like this. You can expect. People love that love the answers to that phrase. What can I expect? Whether that's base info that they need, which you guys talk, a lot about, especially in those initial top 5 parent needs in kind of Joanna's intro.
Yep.
And you talk about those ways that, hey, you can expect an improved experience next year because of this, this, and this.
And noticeably is an important part of that too. Like, you have to tell them. It has to be, better signs, and just outright saying, we're making these improvements. Here's why. And for the ones that are because of your feedback, we're doing, this is one of those things.
We've seen those in our parent surveys before where they say, this was better this year and we appreciated it. And so that noticeably thing is really important. So noticeably improved product. I love that. And that should be on everybody's wall when they're sitting at their desk. How are we? What is it going to be noticeably improved next summer? I love this.
And I think on your wall is important. Like this, the report from last year's campers. Like, please take that to a printer and have it put up on a poster. Like, having it in Google Sheets or Excel is great, but you don't want this thing to be buried. You want it to be something you see every day and go, right, I have to get back to Jared to talk about his middle son, and, the specifics of that. Have it out and visible.
That's great.
So that's good call.
That's our not yet enrolled folks. So we got not yet enrolled campers. We got not yet enrolled parents from previous experiences. What are the other audiences?
Yep. And then and this is just kind of a different way than I usually explain it with those 3 most effective audiences, because we're addressing little pieces of this with the second set of audiences, which is our kids that are registered for next summer and parents that are registered for next summer, because those are ones that you can start to set up a system, something that you can measure for referrals. That's getting into that second group, their friends. So you can really work with them on giving them such a good experience that they can't help but tell their friends. But you can also be thoughtful and intentional about giving them the tools to better recommend your camp. Like, we have gone so far with camp parents, with the camps that we're working with camp parents and focus groups, to say, when you hear another parent say this is when you can easily, justifiably say you should talk to our camp director. And then one of the examples that is a long time example from a long time ago was a camp parent who'd been a good referral parent, had referred their camp before, said, something happened at my daughter's gymnastics club that I mentioned you guys, so watch out for this parent. And the story was a bunch of moms in the bleachers watching kids in gymnastics class, and this particular girl was doing great and happy, and the mom was almost in tears about it and said, this is the only place that she feels safe. And that like she just doesn't have a
Wow.
community at camp.
Hmm.
And that camp mom was like, that's when I knew to tell this mom to talk to our camp director, because I trust that this will be a safe place for their kid. But we had, that's when we started to think we have to give them the things to watch for, so those parents can say, try our camp.
That's super helpful.
Yeah.
Super helpful.
The fifth audience, because
feel-
you've asked me, the fifth audience is, we just call it new acquisitions.
Okay.
That is, people that
Right.
are outside of this. It does include that third group, which is connected community members, alums. So for your audience, that's churches, that's youth group leaders, it is friends of friends, that kind of thing. And then in terms of the effectiveness, we don't even really talk about it in the book because it's so much more time and effort than it's worth, is like Google ads and SEO and all of those
Sure.
things that's spaghetti at the wall kind of things. The first three we know work.
I love
Sure.
that. I love that you say that. It's spaghetti against the wall, because some people think that that's going to be the panacea. Like, this is, we've got the internet. If I just get it out there to enough people, then they will come.
Yeah.
And
it's a build.
You're saying that's not gonna do it for us.
Right.
And I'll tell you that one of the interesting things, coming from my background and running a camp that runs week-long sessions in a faith-based organization, getting into this job and working with other camps that have different length of sessions that I was used to, etc. They're very good at measuring because it's business for them, and they're really thoughtful. But it's about how much we can accomplish in 6 days that they don't believe we can accomplish in 6 days. I had a camp today. It was a 7-week camp. Say, if we shorten our sessions, then we won't have the same kind of impact. And I'm always like, well, I went to camp for 6 days a year. And look at me now. I am here because of something my camp counselor said to me when I was 13 years old.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, Jake built the whole, like our main effective camp measurement process on a week-long camp experience.
Of course.
And all of it's kind of measured around that.
Yeah.
Because that's the main session still. That's the most common session that people attend to overnight camp across the country.
Yeah.
Travis, I'm going a tiny bit backwards quickly, mostly out of appreciation in what I think I've seen and we've seen. This idea that, so those who have signed up, right? Those who whenever you open registration, those that have signed up, so many of us, so many camp directors are like, okay, we got them and we're done. And of course we're going to send them info about when camp opens, the end. And so the depth of content and action steps around that audience that, they've signed up, they're coming, they planned on it the whole time. They answered questions. Yes, we're coming back next year. They get signed up. They're on a payment plan, whatever. The intentionality with that audience is something I don't see a lot of. That was one of the things that I was like, oh, this is a little different way of thinking. This is a unique way of thinking than what a lot of ours are. It's front end, get them to sign up. Oh, that's okay. We did it.
Yeah. One of the things that I do with my camps is I think about there are kind of 5 points of contact with parents, and each one of them needs their own plan. And this is, a very important one. Like, the first point is just marketing and sales. The second one is you're registered. And because we have this big gap often, I mean, even if they register a month before camp, you have a big gap between here's a output of cash to here's the thing I'm paying for. That space is so big compared to other people that sell other things. We have to fill that space. That space can't just be one contact and then, a week before they arrive, here's the packing list and directions. It needs to be filled for a couple of reasons. It will 100% build trust with those families if you can get more information to them in a thoughtful and intentional way. That's an easy thing to automate. It also makes your life easier, because if they register and you send them a 57-page PDF of the parent handbook and they have 6 months until they get to camp, they will not read it. They will not absorb any of it, and it's going to be a frustration for you. So if you send them the PDF, but then send them pieces of that are most important to you, it'll help fill that space. Those parents arrive with a much greater sense of trust, and it's cost you much less time and effort. Those just nervous parents that you haven't given enough info to.
And this is so important as we talk about it from a ministry standpoint, as we talk about prepping kids for camp. We talked about this with Rob from the Rhythms of Faith Project last time on our podcast, is that prepping kids for this experience and helping the parents, helping equip them in the home to prepare them is going to help them have a more successful experience. It's going to help you be more successful in your outcomes. So I absolutely love this. You can pair these things together. And so you're communicating, it helps you with your outcomes, but it also helps with your retention and your communication with your primary clientele. So this is just awesome. I know we're getting close to time. Go ahead.
Well, the other piece that I will add to that with this big space of time is that it also allows you to develop different media. So it's not just text. You're not just sending them emails. You're sending them videos of little pieces of the handbook. But it also allows you to test out systems for communicating what works. And more, we're telling camps, email them things and then text them that you emailed them. And so we're varying not just you got emails and it disappears, but it's like, we're sending you an email 2 days with this very important information. Or did you see that email we sent yesterday with that important information? Any way you can reinforce your own messages, effectively market your marketing, that again is kind of intimidating to set up the first time, but it makes your life easier.
Effectively market your marketing. I love that. So don't just say, when they respond, say, well, I sent you an email.
Yeah.
That people don't respond well when you say that, do they? So I know we're getting close to time for you, Travis, but like I did want to bring this up because I ran into this in the book and I was just like, oh, this is so cool. So it was in the section on December. So once again, you guys, this is sectioned off by month. So it goes September all the way through May, and then it's got a section of the summer. So it's got what you should be thinking about, then what you should be doing with each of these 5 audiences. Really good stuff. And so December is oftentimes when our camps, the ones that we work with in the Christian world, send out their end of year appeal. They're trying to get some of these end of year donations and things like that. And they often send out this generic appeal letter. And this line that is in the book in the December section is, to use targeted messaging, quote, so that each individual knows that they are being spoken to personally. And so I want you to unpack this. What does that look like? When I'm sending out something like this appeal in December, I still want to do it, but how can I make it so that they know that they're being spoken to personally?
Excellent. So the easiest way is to use whatever email software or donation software you have and customize this is again a time saver. It's going to feel like it takes you a little longer, but customize the messages that go out so that it uses that person's name. And if you're smart, you will be not using just that person's name in the salutation part of an email, but you're going to put their name into the body of the email as well, because when they're skimming, they will stop when they see their own name. And you have to be smart about how you write emails. It's an art. It's one of the things I love doing is just ripping apart emails, especially fundraising emails, for what's effective. You can also use their name in the subject line. So that's the basic level of personalization. You also can set up automation so that all the emails are kind of written, or you have a little chunk at the bottom where you can put in something specific about their kids. If you're a camp that takes notes on kids, like what was the impact, or you've recorded the kids' stories, or I love camps that will take all the kids from one family and take a picture of all those kids and send it to the parents, because the number of times that ends up on Christmas cards is incredible.
Oh,
so
wow.
you're just like, here's our kids at camp this summer, and that's the Christmas card. And I know camps that have on drop-off day, they have a big, like a kind of a fence that the family walks under, and they have a camp photographer there. They're like, hold on, everybody just gather up, like push the luggage slide. Here's our camp banner and logo. Here's the happy family. That makes it on Christmas cards all the time too.
Wow.
Love it.
That's great stuff.
Travis, right before we hit go, everybody, Travis said I could talk about this for hours, so as clearly we could as well. But there's lots to dive into. Tell us about where we can find the playbook, find more about GoCamp Pro, and any other places that would be good to connect with you.
Yeah, thank you. Again, thanks. I really appreciate being on the Sacred Playground show. I'm thrilled to be here. You can find us at gocamp.pro. That is our website. It doesn't end in .com, it ends in .pro. And so you can find all that there. That includes links to where to get the book right at the top of it. And you can also find our podcast. If you search for GoCamp Pro in any of your podcast apps, you will find all of them. Camp Hacker, my show that I've been running with camp friends for the past 15 years. Camp Code, The Pudding, you'll find Jake on that.
May I recommend The Pudding?
Yeah. So GoCamp.pro is the hub of it all.
All right. Well, it sounds like we are nearing our end here. And we just want to thank you so much for being with us, Travis. And it sounded like you might have a stat of the week to share. And so this is a segment that we often do.
Yep.
And so do you have for us a
I
stat
do.
of the week?
I do.
Stat of the week. Stat of the week. Stat of the week.
This came out of a conversation held at the ACA Tri-State Conference this year, and it was stunning, but explained so much about what's going on in the industry right now. The Foundation for Jewish Camps surveyed all of the Jewish camps in America, which is over 600, and they realized that in the last 2 years, 2/3 of senior leadership has changed. Burned everybody out in the pandemic. They got their camps through it, and they just pulled the chute. And so if you are feeling overwhelmed and you're new in this job, 2/3 of the industry is in that same spot. So
Thanks for that. And that is our stat of the week. Travis, this conversation has been so great. Again, we could talk about this for hours, I'm sure, and we do when we're talking just you
Totally.
and me. So I really appreciate you being on the podcast today and sharing some of your wisdom. This has been super valuable. And everybody go out and get this playbook and check it out and start applying the wisdom to your camp today. Thanks so much, Travis. And thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you next time on the Sacred Playgrounds podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Sacred Playgrounds podcast. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/sacredplaygrounds or at Sacred Playgrounds on Instagram. Be sure to hit the follow or subscribe button wherever you're getting this podcast. And if you like this content and it's helpful, you can support the podcast by clicking that support button. Our theme music was written and performed by Taylor Wilson. You can find all his original songs wherever you get your music. Learn more about what we're up to and connect with the team at sacredplaygrounds.com.